May please be seated. Order, honorable members. I want to take this opportunity, as we know that we had a debate on the State of the Province address, which was delivered by the Premier yesterday. Now we are approaching an opportunity where the Premier will then provide the reply to the debate and the contributions made by the honorable members. At this point, I would like to request the Secretary to read the first order. The Secretary to read the second order.
Reply to the debate on the Premier's State of the Province address.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I now call on the Honorable Premier.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, for this opportunity. Can I also say thank you very much to the Honourable members for their contribution in this debate, both here in this session in Genadendal. I think really historic that we are here in this town of Genadendal, but also those that are back in the chamber, and of course those that are in their constituencies. Thank you very much for all of your contributions. I also would like to say that in my reply, I'm not going to reply specifically to every member of the Democratic Alliance, because I think in this reply I'm going to spend some time on the issues raised by the opposition. But can I just say to each and every member who took part in this debate from the DA, thank you very much for your contributions in this, for your continued work in our standing committees, and of course those ministers in our cabinet. Thank you very much for what you do in the interests of every single citizen in our province. It is noticed and it is absolutely appreciated. Thank you. I also want to, before I get going, reflect just on the space that we're in, and once again say to the school principal, Mr. Benjamin, thank you very much for allowing us to be here, allowing this parliament to be here, and it is really much appreciated. I also would like to then recognize Genadendal once more, the people of Genadendal. I referenced a couple of things that happened in this town throughout history. I also referenced some things that I'd read about this town, from our own experiences on visiting this town. But there's one thing that really stands out, that every single time you come here, you learn something more. You learn something more about our people, and you learn something more definitely about our history. And specifically there, I would like to recognize Dr. Barley once again, who took us on that tour. Who took us on a tour, and you could feel his passion in that tour, and it really stands out. And I thank him for that. I thank the board. I thank the museum. I also would like to thank the nurses of the healthcare facility here that is a temporary space because we are busy revamping the clinic at the moment. But I got to actually visit those nurses who give care to the citizens of Genadendal. I must say that in all of my experience in government, when you go to a temporary facility while government is revamping and reinvesting like we do here in a new clinic, a temporary facility could not have ever been better than the one that I saw yesterday, where you have got a temporary facility in one of your historic buildings with, I mean, so much space was unbelievable. Really, it was great to see the kind of infrastructure that you've got that has been developed over years and years and years, and that can be used in this regard. Honourable members, I think before I really get into the meat of replying, I would like to first of all just recap. Obviously, those of you who have tuned in and are watching this reply right now, of course, yesterday in the State of the Province address, first of all, I spoke about our response to COVID-19 and our four-prong approach. Yesterday, a great occurrence happened where we had the first vaccinations in this next trial of vaccines happening in our province, the first province to kick it off. But of course, it's happening across all of our provinces because provinces have this competency of health, and that's where these plans get rolled out in every single province, everyone with their own plan. But I want to say that it was the COVID-19 plan that we spent quite a lot of time on. Of course, then it was also talking about recovery. And while this COVID-19 is not by a long shot left us here, it has left us pretty devastated. It has left us with many losses, and of course, many of those are job losses, many of those linked to our recovery plan of getting those jobs back, of making sure that we have got creating a safe environment, but also focusing on dignity and that welfare net and that support net across our province. Of course, I also ended off in speaking about the two big departments in our government. That's where most of our budget goes. And perhaps also talking about budget, I noticed that a number of people were expecting the State of the Province and the budget address to be aligned into one, which I also thought quite strange because the members that were raising that, just for your information, we do have a budget speech coming. That's got to come on the back of Minister Tito Mboweni giving his budget speech. But I do know that there seems to be delays on that national level around letters of allocation to provinces. That I can only think goes to some of the infighting at our national level that I spoke about, this environment that we have to operate within, and we still need clarity on that budget. So it's very difficult in a state of the province to align actual budgets when we have a process, and I'm sure all of you will remember that now that I've reminded you of it. I also want to say that something that really stood out for me, it really surprised me, is how much energy was put into the kind of delivery of the speech, how much energy was put into whether I tabled a document and what I spoke to, and whether it was submitted through new technological mechanisms like WhatsApp groups where it connects all of you, and of course this environment that we find ourselves in with able to conduct a parliament in a multiple of spaces across this province at one time, running on the back of data and a broadband capability that's being rolled out in this province. I think that astounded me. It really did. There was a lot of noise about the means of delivery, let alone, and not much noise or substance to the substance of the actual speech, the detail and the data. But just for clarity, honourable members, of course, everything that I say is in Hansard, because that's how it is recorded. When I or any of you speak in Parliament, that gets recorded in Hansard. Of course, over and above that, and what I spoke to was the speech. It was detailed and documented, and you've got access to both of those, and both of those you can hold me accountable to. Then, Mr. Speaker, in replying, I think I must, many people raised the issue on vaccines and whether we should be procuring our own vaccines and the vaccine rollout itself, a role of a province and a national government. Without getting into too much detail, I think I just want to say two things. Number one is, as I stand here today, we do not have a single SAPRA approved vaccine for rollout in South Africa right now. We have other countries in the world that are reaching 70 and 80% coverages. We've got countries where 1.3 million people are being vaccinated a day. And in South Africa, not one vaccine is approved yet for rollout. What we do have is special dispensation for the continuation of a trial. And I applaud that. I've said yesterday that I think our specialists, our professors, those people involved in these trials are outstanding. And I really want to support them absolutely in how we get these trials to move us to an approved space as quickly as possible. But the second reality facing us right now, that as I stand here, even this trial, which is giving us so much hope at the moment, we have 13,000 vaccines in this province. 13,000 vaccines in total. For 130,000 healthcare workers, we have 13,000 vaccines to start for nearly 7 million people. And quite frankly, that, for me, is a massive risk, just looking at our trajectory and the pathway that we have to navigate in the year to come. I would also like to say that another criticism that we picked up in the debate, and perhaps the biggest criticism coming from the ANC and the Honourable Dugmore, was how the poor are treated in this province. It's quite interesting that this is what is brought up by the ANC. The ANC, the party that believes in their longevity, is based on keeping our citizens poor. Because there's one thing for certain, and is under ANC government in the last 27 years, people in this country are getting poorer and not the opposite. Under ANC rule in this country, they are getting poorer and not the opposite. And if we actually want to unpack how the poor are treated in this province, go and just have a look at our response to COVID-19 and where our absolute zooming in focus and what's been said in this house today. Have a look at how the ANC tried to stop us during those school feeding scheme programs, or try to stop our ECD department in making sure that we were getting nutrition and food to the poorest of the poor, those who needed it most. Who was trying to stop us? The very ANC who believes that in order for them to stay in power, they must keep our citizens poor. And then they have the audacity to raise that as an issue in this province. It's not only the feeding schemes, it's how we deal with every single thing within this government and where our budgets go. How we enable an enabling environment so that citizens in this province can find a pathway to prosperity. That is what we focus on. That is what is at the backbone of every single thing that we do. I mean, it was raised earlier by the Honourable Mackenzie. I mean, how disgusting is it when a premier has to fire one of his MECs because they stole money from Mandela's funeral? I mean, if that is not something that really showcases and epitomizes what the ANC stands for, well, I don't think there's anything else. So I think it is really rich when that is a criticism in this debate from a party that have got absolutely nothing to show for in an opposite direction. I would also like to talk about the issue raised around land. And of course, land is a massive issue for us. It is a massive issue in our country and definitely in our province. I commended yesterday the Honourable Simmers in what he is doing in the innovative way, in the way he is trying to bring land and land ownership to people in this province. A thing that is not spoken about often enough at this level is the policy differential between the ANC government and the DA government and their position on land. And I think nothing stands out more than what was mentioned today around two Mr. Klutis. There are two Mr. Klutis in this province. One Mr. Kluti in this constituency, in this jurisdiction, in this district. That Mr. Kluti, a really successful farmer, someone who we can be absolutely proud of as South Africans. That Mr. Kluti is not able to own the land that he farms. Why? It's a policy position of the ANC that says you will not own the land in this country. The ANC will own the land in this country. Why do they do that? It is so that they can control it and go back to the age-old problem that everything the ANC does, they do it for their friends, they do it for their politicians, they do it for people connected to the ANC. So the other Mr. Kluti, someone who we have spoken about many times, I have, when I held the position of the Minister of Agriculture, that position that Minister Meyer holds now, Minister Meyer has made strong statements supporting Mr. Ivan Kluti. Mr. Ivan Kluti, you will remember, he was part of a program on a farm called Bellevue, just on the Cape Town side of the Paarl Mountain. Mr. Kluti was given an opportunity, but guess what the Department of Land Reform did to Mr. Kluti? Is they gave him the farm and someone else the farm, two people. And then after that, without giving them rights, without giving them even a lease document that they could enter into an agreement where they could actually start even getting their own electricity supply from the municipality, because you've got to go and show your lease agreement or your land holding before a municipality can supply you with electricity. No lease came out of that department whatsoever until the municipality had to cut off the electricity. Other farmers in the region went to pay that electricity account just to keep him enabled to farm, and then the very same ANC, the very same Land Reform Department exited him from that farm. A long process, and this is an award-winning pig farmer. The next process is he gets a farm out in the Swartland district. He gets a 30-year lease. That was a battle on its own. What was referred to by the Honourable Mackenzie is that an ex-ANC MP who finished his term just a year and a half ago, that MP Kalaku, he seems to be the leader of a coalition organization who is now going to be given that very farm. The farm that Mr. Kluti eventually got not to own, but through a lease finally, and even that lease agreement is not adhered to because the ANC do not believe in land ownership. The ANC are now kicking this Mr. Kluti off his farm, so one of their mates, one of their politicians, what they believe in actually, no land ownership, and everything we do is for our friends and our family. Absolute scandal. But I also asked the members of this House to come with solutions, come with new things, and the Honourable Leader of the Opposition said to me he would like me to come along with the Minister of that Land Reform Department and talk about the 5,000 hectares in this region. The Honourable Member, I absolutely will come along. I will come along with you. I will come along with the Minister. Let's come and see what we can do about getting that 5,000 hectares transferred into individuals' ownership here in this region. Not the ANC policy on some half-baked lease. Let's come along and see how we can get that land transferred through a process so people can become landowners in this region. And I absolutely take you up on that offer. I will do that, and our officers can get together. Let's get that going as quickly as possible. Let's make sure that by next year, when we have a State of the Province address, we can actually say 5,000 hectares were handed over. And so I take that challenge up absolutely, and I look forward to the process. I said that I'm not going to address every single person in this reply, but Honourable Klego, I have to just two things to you. I think the first thing I need to say to you
Honorable
is,
Premier, will you please address the presiding officer?
thank you very much, Speaker. Honourable Speaker, through you to the Honourable Klejo, I have to just say two things. The first thing I need to talk about is his statement that said this province has failed in dealing with COVID-19. I think that is such an insult to those frontline workers in this province. It is such an insult and dishonor and disrespect to those men and women who are in our healthcare system, who spent days on end fighting to save lives in this province. I think that disrespect is horrendous, that he can hide behind privilege in a parliament and make such an insult to these amazing people, these frontline workers in our province. That, sir, is shocking. But what is even more outrageous and shameful is when he starts to talk about how a virus gets spread between provinces and one province sending a virus to another province and vice versa. That, sir, is outrageous, is shameful, is something that I think you should stand up and apologize for through you, Mr. Speaker. Because, you know, we have laws in our country that talk about fake news. And if ever there was fake news around a pandemic, that is fake news. That is absolutely shameful and outrageous. Shame on you, honourable member. Speaker, I would like to talk to the Honourable Windvogel. And perhaps at the start of the Honourable Windvogel's speech, she spoke about corruption. And then she said the Honourable or the President is dealing with this corruption. Is this the current President, President Ramaphosa? Is it Cyril? Or perhaps it was Jacob? Was Jacob dealing with corruption? I think the big problem with our country at the moment is how the ANC deal with corruption, how they have been dealing with it. And the problem is that we know billions and billions of rands are actually stolen from the poorest of the poor in our country. Those billions in our country that government is supposed to use, those billions and billions that are raised on the back of hard work by tax-paying individuals in our system and get stolen on the way to giving service delivery to citizens in our province. That is absolutely shameful as well. And quite frankly, we can't talk about the president is dealing with it and look at this SIU and look at this program. What we want to see are those people that were responsible for the corruption in jail and not evading the Zondo commissions and finding excuses to get away from courts of law. It is just unacceptable. And if you were really serious about dealing with corruption, we would see many more people behind bars in this country. We would see many more people being held accountable and responsible for the millions and billions that have been stolen from the poorest of the poor in our country. But there's one thing, honourable member, that you raised in your debate, and you spoke about the transport of farm workers. And I support you on that. I think that is a crystal clear issue to be raised in a platform like this. And we've seen the horrendous accidents that have taken place and people put at risk that are transported in systems that are unacceptable. I want to commend Minister Meyer here, who has already said that in this province, he's going to champion looking at how we change that. Through regulation, through licensing, he's going to look at different mechanisms that we actually deal with this problem. And of course, I think we all need to make sure that we're putting inputs into this problem, because I agree with you on that. This is something we have to change. Of course, that's what this platform is about. It's about being able to raise issues that are affecting the citizens of our province. I thank you for raising that point. One other thing that I want to raise under the Honourable Windvogel's speech is that, and it's perhaps not necessarily only under or because of what she was saying, it's probably everybody from the ANC that has spoken today, and in all of the debates that we have in our province year after year. And this is my challenge back to the ANC. I never hear you bragging about what you're doing in other provinces. I never hear you saying, this is where the ANC has put some policy in place and this is the difference that it's made. You never do it. Why not? Why not? Raise issues that say where we are governing, things are getting better. Maybe it's because you can't hear, but that's the challenge to you. Please put those to your colleagues in other provinces. Come up with great solutions. Lead from the front and make a difference for the citizens where you govern. Because that's exactly what we are doing where we govern. Leading from the front to make the biggest difference we can for the time allocated to us that we will do, and we swear that allegiance to the Constitution on behalf of the citizens of this province. Speaker, I then move on to the Honourable Heron, and thank you very much for your contributions. I think, first of all, the statement that you made about undermining COVID-19 regulations. You know, we do believe in this province that it must be data-led and evidence-led. I also firmly believe, and I've said a number of times, that a number of our regulations during this COVID-19 pandemic over the last year have not been truly thought out, have not been properly effective, or probably even negatively affecting things in the wrong direction. And that is why we always argued for finding that balance between blunt regulations on the one side and managing the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as how do we get the balance right on the other side. And that is where those regulations come in. And not all of those regulations are equal. And where they are not, I will definitely speak out against them. We believe in a differentiated approach because the virus believes in a differentiated approach. It does not attack citizens equally across every province in the same way. We have waves in different provinces, in different regions and districts at different times. And so you must be able to be much more flexible than we are right now with those regulations. I also noted, Honourable Heron, that in the Standing Committee, you were advocating that we keep this hardest lockdown in place until we've got either vaccines or in preparation for the third wave. But we cannot have that kind of approach. We've got to make sure we have balance between the two. It is about that balance and how we learn from our processes that is actually going to enable us to deal with the next wave and the one after that as we bring vaccines into the system. We have to be nimble, and we also have to apply the science to those regulations. Because at the moment, when we have these blunt lockdowns, they definitely are detrimental. For example, in the Northern Cape, they were held ransom to so many of these lockdowns that we were probably found much more necessary perhaps in our cities or in those provinces where the waves were much higher. And so it's just not the Eastern Cape or the Western Cape or the Northern Cape that needs to see these differentials. We need to see them across our districts and be able to act quickly and swiftly. I also want to say to the Honourable Member, he said a few things about vaccines. And the one thing he said to me is why, he was speaking about the lack of trying. And why didn't you try earlier? And I want to say I think he's right. We should have tried earlier. Because as I said, right now, we've only got 13,000 vaccines in our province under a trial. So I think we should have tried earlier. He also mentioned that he thought it was quite embarrassing that we are only calling suppliers now. Honourable Member, I find it not embarrassing in the least in trying to save lives in our province. And those men and women who work in our procurement department, who are making those calls to those vaccine companies, to those pharmaceutical companies, I give them every single bit of support that I can, and thank them for making those calls. They are not embarrassing at all. They really are working very, very hard at making sure that we get vaccines into our system. And wherever there's a failure or shortfall, we need to fill that as quickly as possible. And also to those very same procurement officials that have shown through procuring for PPE in our province, the excellent work that they've done. They're going to be applying exactly their same methodologies, that I wish them all the luck in making sure, not only for our province, but if we can even get vaccines that are going to help other provinces, we will do so as well. It is not embarrassing in the least. The Honourable Heron also spoke about our infrastructure authority. And I know that the Honourable Member thinks that maybe that I am able to perform miracles, but in 4 months it is impossible to set up an infrastructure authority. I said yesterday that what had happened in the last 4 months, I spelled it out in exactly where we are, and it is going to take months and months still to put an infrastructure authority in place. It takes time. We will do it properly. We will make sure that system is set up that it can be corruption-free. We will make sure that this authority is set up in the best interests of the citizens of this province. And we will do it as fast as we can, as efficiently as we can, but also we will do it properly. Speaker, I want to speak to the Honourable Smith. And I also know that the Honourable Mackenzie has mentioned a few things in his sweeping position that he had at the end of the debate. But I want to say to the Honourable Smith, you raise a couple of issues where you make these spurious sort of announcements about corruption. You talk about things happening in municipalities here in this region. Honourable Member, I would actually challenge you to give detail on what you are saying, or tell me the case number of the charge that you have laid. But perhaps it's also quite interesting if I have a look at the one item you're talking about is IRF number 599, and another item you spoke about, which is quite a large electricity bill of an outstanding amount, plus the penalties that were paid on that bill. The interesting thing is both of these instances happened before the DA took over control in the Agulhas municipality. They actually happened under ANC control. So you must also be careful on the kind of evidence that you get and then what's happening around it. But what I can say to you is that the DA government is busy dealing with it at the moment. It was ANC bad government that actually ended up with putting us in this position of that IRF or that outstanding electricity bill. But the DA government and the DA mayor is busy dealing with it, and we will fix that problem. But can I say once more that you cannot come and say these things without giving the evidence, using the protection of this House to make spurious comments, and then do nothing about it. You've either got to go and lay that charge, or say it explicitly here so that it is in the Hansard, so that it can be held and kept on record. You can't get away without doing that, because that is unacceptable, and that is really politicking with this space we find ourselves. But maybe that goes back to the same point about how the ANC does deal with corruption. We've got to deal with it decisively. We've got to lay these charges. We've got to make sure that those charges end up with people getting into courts, and that the court's findings and that there are consequences to that corruption. We have to deal with that in our country. If we don't, we will carry on in the same vein that we always have under the ANC. Like I said last year, like the Titanic, just keep on going down until we hit the bottom of the ocean. That is unacceptable, and you need to actually stand up stronger in these things.
Who is the honourable member speaking? May I, Honourable Premier, will you please take your seat? Honourable members, I would like to make an appeal that we follow the rules if we so wish to address the House, and we do so by first indicating by a show of hand, but we don't speak and the honorable members in the chamber, the table staff there that are able to guide you, and they inform us if you so wish to say anything in the House. So that helps us to maintain order and also ensure that those who are connected virtually, there's no disruption, and there's no disruption for anyone that's listening, let alone the Premier who's currently on the podium. On that note, I would like to request the Premier to proceed.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Speaker, I will now move on to the Honourable Christians, and thank you very much for your contribution. Perhaps, first of all, you spoke about ivermectin. And I cannot do what you say, because as a responsible government, everything we do has to be based on the studies and the approval. I spoke about vaccines, and we can only start procuring vaccines and administering vaccines on approved vaccines that go through trials, which are happening now with Johnson & Johnson. I also saw a very disturbing item in the news today where even some of the researchers dealing with the Pfizer vaccine that's on its way here are questioning the effectiveness against 501v2. And that's worrying to me as well. But exactly the same in therapeutics. Whether it's a vaccine or a therapeutic, we have to make sure that we have proper trials, proper testing, because that's what we believe in as a government. And I think as a responsible government looking after the health and safety of its citizens, we have to make sure that those approvals are in place. But I also agree with you that when a therapeutic comes along, we need to act with vigor. We need to make sure that we do everything possible. If this is a life-saving drug, if this is like dexamethasone that's going to make a big difference, we've got to find ways to check the validity and then make sure that it is available. But that's why I explicitly said I really welcome, first of all, SAPRA's announcement that any doctor in our province or in our country can actually apply for that Section 25 and administer to their patient, but of course must be part of also giving us data on that trial. But I also, as I spoke about the Stellenbosch and I think it's Stellenbosch-led and UCT-supported trial that's happening at the moment with ivermectin, and any of the other ones, we've got to make sure that we find ways in which we can protect ourselves going into the what is surely going to happen to us, that third wave. And of course, between now and then, it's about therapeutics and vaccines, and it's a race, and we've got to make sure we support every single part of it. I think you also spent a bit of time talking about the regulations that we're going to change around liquor. And I was responsible for that legislation at a time. 11.5 years ago, I was in opposition, where it took us a few years to write that piece of legislation. It was so sort of public participated, it actually worried me because we spent too much time year after year instead of getting a piece of legislation in place. I want to say again that regulation and legislation is one of the tools that we have. I'm looking forward to this change, this regulatory change. It's going to come, and you guys are going to be able to take it out on public participation again. And the comments that you made, you can put it back in at the standing committee level. We've got to make sure we get a good piece of regulation. Let's try quickly and do it. Let's get another one on the back of it. I think we probably change regulation and legislation too slowly. We're innovating, we're trying to find new ways. I think we need to find new ways and quicker ways of passing legislation. Let's use more technological mechanisms of getting public participation in, because we all know you go into those halls and 6 people come and address you on the legislation. But we've got millions of people out there. Let's get like we are here today. Let's get remote inputs into it. Let's get a good piece of legislation. Let's test it, try it. If it works, great. If it doesn't, we'll stop it and try something else. But it was really interesting for me yesterday going on the tour and looking at the printing press, and you'll remember it, and the sample that we were given that came off the printing press, which was, many years ago. And this speaks about alcohol. It speaks about the effect of alcohol and how it keeps people poor, how it undermines your ability to work, how it causes ructions in the household, huisvrede it speaks about. It talks about how it really does lead you in the wrong direction, and the abuse of alcohol puts people at risk. And of course, that is what we've got to do. We've got to create a regulatory environment that helps us with behavioral change for our citizens. It's not a brand new problem. It's a problem that's been there for a long time. And of course, we need to be able to innovate and find regulatory environments that change it and enable behavior change. At the end of the day, it is not about, it is actually about the abuse of alcohol, what it does, how it affects trauma, how it affects gender-based violence and crime. And so that is also not really talking about regulation, because we can actually write a law that says you will not drink and abuse anybody. That's not going to help us. What's going to help us is the regulatory framework, but then influencing behavioral change. And at the end of the day, that's what it's got to be. It's about responsibility of citizens. And of course, we've all got to work together in making sure we get that right. Then with the Honourable Marais, again, I think a lot to say about federalism. Sometimes a bit confused about federalism and almost independence, but the Honourable Marais, I must say that that's what I said yesterday. And specifically federal powers where the ANC fails. And that's primarily what's driving so much of those areas where we're putting in extra money, is where we're trying to deal where failure is at a national level. Policing. I mean, it is absolutely evident that we need to have better policing control. And I think it was said by the Honourable Christians, I think also by you, let's get more decentralized mechanisms so that we can actually take more responsibility at a local level, at a municipal level, at a regional level, and at a provincial level. Whether it's policing, whether it's education, as I spoke about in our oversight bodies in education. And that's really what I think drives much of the debate at the moment, is trying to fix those failures. Honourable members, perhaps just highlighting before I get towards closing some of the other issues that were raised. And I said that I wasn't really going to debate with every single person, but I must say, if I want to highlight a few issues as raised, I know it was raised by Minister Mayor, also by Honourable Bosman, the issue of SASSA. And I think that is something that was a huge blight on our province. The way that our most vulnerable, poorest of the poor, were treated outside those SASSA offices, and all SASSA offices where it is just not moving properly, where people who are the most vulnerable in our society, who should be the ones that we care for the most. And that is another area that I haven't spoken about from a federal point of view, but perhaps it is time as well that provinces get given much more power when it comes to looking after the vulnerable, because one thing that has been proven is that SASSA and the National Department is not able to do it. I mean, it was an absolute scunder when that minister sat in that Casper. And we still don't know, because we haven't received from the investigation who gave the order to water cannon our citizens sitting in wheelchairs, to water cannon our citizens, the most vulnerable, waiting for something to help them feed themselves and their families. I mean, that is an absolute embarrassment. I think I would have really liked to have seen the opposition also taking strong positions on that as the ANC in this province, and taking a position on that and how they actually also take on their national colleagues when the citizens of this province are feeling pain, when the citizens of this province are being abused in the way that they were being abused. That is unacceptable, and we need to find ways in which we fix this. I also want to say that I haven't responded to the Honourable Said. It was interesting that the Honourable Said was given more time than the leader of the opposition, but I don't think I need to respond to him, because the Minister of Education, I think, gave him sufficient clap. So I'll just then move on to a few other closing comments. What I want to say in the state of the province, we have got huge challenges ahead of us, our province and our country. The challenges of getting beyond COVID-19 are massive. And we need to make sure that every one of us are pushing in the same direction so that we get the best solutions we can. And I can assure you that this province will continue to lead from the front in this battle. We call on every single citizen to keep on doing what they're doing. At this stage, I want to again say thank you so much to the frontline workers. They really have been phenomenal and have stood out. I also want to say thank you to the NGOs and those citizens who get absolutely no reward for what they have done. Those ones that have stood up when they were called on and have fed our nation and have fed those citizens the most in need, who work tirelessly day and night in those NGOs, in those soup kitchens. I want to thank those businesses who have also been there. Those businesses who I think it was 2 days ago, I must refer back to Laingsburg and to the Karoo region, who I saw again, still, even though we've started to see some rain in that region, still coke and those trucks taking water to the most vulnerable. Thank you so very much for that. To those Mpumis who have got those soup kitchens across our province, thank you so very much for what you are doing. We really do appreciate it. I also want to say that we are really sad to have to say goodbye to General Matakata, I think, as you know her, but now General Mokhabudi. As you heard from Minister Fritz, she has got married, and I congratulate her on her wedding. But I want to say to her, it is really a sad day to be able to say goodbye to you, because you really have made such a difference for us here in the province. We really started to get into a great working relationship. You know, we speak about federal, but federal is also about a relationship. It's a relationship between a national government and a provincial government, or a national government, a provincial government, and a local government. And we have this massive confrontation in trying to build safety for our citizens between the role of SAPS and the leadership of SAPS. But our national commissioner engaged, and we went through a process, and we got General Matakata. And thank you, General. I wish you all the very best in your next journey. I believe it's also going to still be, and I hope, adding to our policing system in our country. I would like to say to General Patakile, who has now been asked to act, thank you very much for stepping up at this moment when safety is such a key priority for us. We need to make sure that we keep our citizens safe. And I would like to say to Minister Fritz and the process that's ahead of us, please, let's enter a process again. Let's get ourselves a good, upstanding general to come and lead this province once again. Let's do it as quickly as we can so that we can continue to focus on building these partnerships between society, communities, our law enforcement officers, our police, our judicial system, our politicians, the whole ecosystem around focusing on safety. And while thinking about safety and talking about safety, Mr. Speaker, what I would also like to say is that I gave my condolences to those families who lost their children in the sand caving in of those tunnels where people were illegally excavating and stealing sand off our road reserves. I once again want to reiterate, and of course I don't have locus standi, you do, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are in this remote space outside of the legislature, but one thing that is amazing is how this setup has been put in place. I want to congratulate you and your team for creating a parliament here in Genadendal. Well done for connecting us to the legislature, to those remote, but of course connecting us to this province. And it really looks great, it looks efficient, it looks like our government. It also looks great because we have these beautiful flower arrangements here. And I noticed outside and inside there are 4 flower arrangements, Mr. Speaker. And I think it would be only fitting if you as Speaker also, like we did last year, sent flowers to a family who had just suffered a major tragedy. That these flowers go to those families of those young children who were lost to us. I think that would be a good fitting end to our state of the province and in a way that we need to support and send our love to these families. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to then say in closing, it has been a privilege and an honor to be able to be here in Genadendal, in this Valley of Grace, to once again put the state of the province out, put our program of work going forward. I said it's going to be a tough year. It is absolutely going to be a tough year. But it is nothing that this DA government, no challenge that this DA government will not rise to. We will rise to this occasion. We will take on this challenge. We will lead from the front. We will make sure that we do everything in our power to make sure that this ecosystem enables growth and jobs, that we build a safer society in the Western Cape. We really start to tackle those big things that affect the most vulnerable, that we make sure that we have dignity and safety and a safety net in well-being of our citizens. We will continue to, in each and every one of our departments, do everything that we can to the best of our ability to make sure that we lead from the front in this province for South Africa. Because for our country, it needs a province like ours to be doing its absolute best in making the biggest difference that we can. Mr. Speaker, thank you once again for the opportunity. Members, thank you for taking part. And citizens of this province, I wish you well this year, and please join hands with us in making sure we get through this pandemic and we build a better province. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Premier, honorable members. Honorable Premier, the gesture to give the flowers to the families of the 4 children, it is the only befitting measure that we can all agree to that those families deserve, and therefore it has been agreed to, Honorable Premier. May their souls rest in peace. I just want to say in ending this session, it's been quite a journey. We started off last year to think about where to go to. And I can say that it was the best decision. I see the Deputy Mayor of Tievereskloof Municipality there. I just want to say, Your Worship, colleague, Papir, thank you very much for being a partner to make this a reality and for supporting us when we wanted to bring SOPA to your municipality and of course to the Overberg district. Please, let's put hands up together for him. Please, let's do that. Thank you. Because if we do this, as we said we will do so in 2019, it means that whenever we go to a locality, we work with those local municipalities. But most importantly, the school principal, the chairperson of the governing body, the governing board members, and the parents here of the school who have agreed to come here, who have agreed for us to come here. And of course, the Minister of Education did not resist, even though it's difficult to use schools, Honorable Premier and Honorable members. But we have committed that we'll have less to no disruption to the school program, and indeed we have delivered to that. We have delivered on that. We did not have any disruption to the school program. It continued seamlessly. Instead, we have made history for the school and the learners at the school here. So thank you very much to the school and the leadership here in general. To the Moravian mission, thank you very much, Ms. Hector, again, for your support. And of course, to the leadership of the museum, thank you very much for everything that you've done for us yesterday. We enjoyed it. We're going to come back to Genadendal one way or the other. Committees must come back here. There's a lot of work to do. We need guest houses in Genadendal. We need restaurants in Genadendal. I was looking for coffee this morning. I want to buy coffee next time in Genadendal. So let us do more as Parliament, as public reps, to make it a community that we are proud of, because there's a lot of history here, and that is the pride of this region already. So thank you very much. To the chamber, honorable members, we see you. Thank you for your indulgence. You've been really behaving there. And obviously, thanks to the honorable members members here in this venue in Genadendal. And we thank the business chambers here, the councillors, speakers, deputy mayors, mayors, everybody, thank you. And the officials of the provincial parliament, without you, none of this would have been possible. Paya Tanki, let us put our hands together for them. On that note, this is the end of the session, and I would like to request that the honorable members rise and the guests rise. But upon the conclusion of the procession, I would like to request that the guests do not move until the honorable members leave, so that there's order. Remember, we have COVID-19, and let us please not to take any chances. This is a matter of life and death. So let us remain standing, and then the honorable members will follow after myself and the Premier as the procession will lead, and then thereafter you'll all leave. The session is adjourned. Thank you very much.